Air cuts like glass at -40 degrees. Ice crystals slice through the wind like microscopic daggers. But deep in a cave that will one day overlook the French countryside, something extraordinary is happening. A child's laughter echoes off stone walls as her grandmother creates shadow puppets against the firelight. Men carefully examine flint cores, planning tomorrow's tool-making session. Women stitch waterproof seams with sinew thread so fine it would impress a modern tailor. The rich aroma of roasting mammoth fat fills the shelter. This isn't the desperate last meal of a dying species. This is tonight's feast for a thriving community. Welcome to 25,000 years ago, the last glacial maximum, Earth's most brutal cold snap in human memory. But here's what nobody tells you about the Ice Age. Our ancestors didn't just endure it, they conquered it. While saber-toothed cats froze in their dens and even cold-adapted Neanderthals vanished from the earth, Homo sapiens did something extraordinary. We thrived. Picture this frozen world, sticky ice sheets 2 miles thick, crushing everything from Scandinavia to Scotland. Sea levels plummeting 400 feet. Annual temperatures in Europe averaging 15 degrees Celsius below today's readings. The Sahara green and dotted with lakes. The Amazon a grassland. This wasn't just cold weather, it was an alien planet. For 100,000 years, ice ages had come and gone. But this one was different. Starting around 33,000 years ago, temperatures didn't just drop, they crashed. The world became a freezer, and the door slammed shut for the next 8,000 years. Scientists call it the last glacial maximum. Our ancestors called it home. In caves across Europe and Asia, archaeologists find the evidence. Not huddled skeletons of starvation victims, but the remains of complex communities. At Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, they uncover ceramic figurines. Art created when survival supposedly consumed every waking moment. In Russia, they find houses built from hundreds of mammoth bones, arranged with architectural precision that would challenge modern builders. The stereotypical caveman dragging his knuckles through the snow. Pure fiction. These were engineers who created the world's first weatherproof clothing. Artists who painted masterpieces by flickering firelight. Traders who moved precious materials thousands of miles across frozen wastelands. They were survivors of an apocalypse that lasted longer than all of recorded human history. And they didn't just survive. At Sungir in Russia, archaeologists discover an elderly man buried 34,000 years ago. His grave contains 3,000 mammoth ivory beads, each requiring hours to create. His clothing, reconstructed from the bead patterns, would have taken 2,500 hours to make. This wasn't subsistence. This was sophistication. The Ice Age shaped us, molded our bodies, our minds, our social structures. Every trait that makes us human, from our creativity to our cooperation, was forged in temperatures that would kill an unprepared modern human in hours. This is their story, the greatest survival tale never properly told. Welcome to hell frozen over. Welcome to humanity's finest hour. But survival in the Ice Age wasn't just about enduring the cold. It was about mastering an entirely different planet. Imagine waking up to find your entire world changing, not over centuries, but in decades. Your grandfather's stories of warm summers suddenly become mythology. The berries your mother gathered last year no longer grow there. Reindeer migration, routes your people followed for generations, vanish as if they never existed. This wasn't science fiction. This was the Younger Dryas. 12,900 years ago, the world was finally warming. The great ice sheets were retreating. Forests crept north across Europe. Humans spread into new territories, following the warmth like flowers tracking the sun. Then, in perhaps as little as a single human lifetime, winter returned with a vengeance. The numbers defy belief. In Greenland, temperatures plummeted 15 degrees Celsius, not over millennia, over decades. Ice cores show the change happened in two stages: an initial drop of 5 degrees in just a few years, followed by another 10-degree cooling. Imagine New York City's climate suddenly becoming like northern Alaska's. That's what our ancestors faced. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. We have witnesses. In a cave in Syria, archaeologists found something remarkable. Sediment layers from Abu Huraira tell a story written in ancient pollen. Layer by layer, they reveal a paradise transforming into tundra. Wild wheat and rye vanishing, trees disappearing. In one human generation, a land of plenty became a frozen desert. The villagers' response? They invented agriculture. Faced with starvation, these desperate humans began cultivating the few wild grasses that survived. The Younger Dryas didn't just test humanity, it transformed us from wanderers into farmers. Crisis became catalyst. Scientists still debate what triggered this frozen apocalypse. The leading theory sounds like a disaster movie. As North American ice sheets melted, a massive lake formed. Lake Agassiz, larger than all today's Great Lakes combined. When an ice dam burst, fresh water equivalent to all the world's rivers times 100 poured into the Atlantic. This freshwater tsunami shut down ocean currents that bring warmth to Europe. The climate system crashed like a computer hitting a fatal error. Within years, maybe months, the conveyor belt of heat stopped. The Younger Dryas lasted 1,300 years. To put that in perspective, it's longer than the time between the fall of Rome and the Renaissance. Entire cultures rose and fell within this single cold snap. In North America, the Clovis culture, those master hunters with their distinctive spear points, vanished. Thus, their sophisticated toolkit, found from Alaska to Mexico, disappears from the archaeological record like someone erased them. One century, they're everywhere. The next, gone. But in their place, new cultures emerged. Diverse, adaptable, innovative. The Folsom people developed even finer projectile points. Coastal peoples turned to the sea. The crisis that killed the mammoths birthed a dozen new ways of being human. The Younger Dryas teaches us something profound. Climate change isn't gradual. It's a switch, not a dial. And when it flips fast. Our ancestors survived temperature swings that make modern climate change look subtle. But they didn't just endure, they evolved. Each crisis forced innovation. Each catastrophe created opportunity. The ice came in a day, but humans adapted in a generation. Stand where London sprawls today and look up. In your mind's eye, stack 10 Empire State Buildings on top of each other. That's how high the ice towered during the last glacial maximum. 2 miles of grinding, groaning glacier pressing down with the weight of mountains. But here's the breathtaking part. While half of North America lay crushed under ice, just miles away, vast grasslands teemed with life. The Ice Age didn't blanket Earth uniformly in white. It created a patchwork planet of extremes. Where New York City stands, buried under a mile of ice. Siberia, mostly ice-free. A vast steppes stretching from Spain to Alaska. The English Channel, a grassy plain where humans hunted horses. the Grand Banks off Newfoundland, prime real estate for mammoth herds. Sea levels plummeted 400 feet as Earth's water locked into ice. Imagine draining the ocean until continental shelves emerged like Atlantis rising. Indonesia connected to Asia. Britain joined to Europe. Japan bridged to Korea. Tasmania merged with Australia. Entire continents appeared from beneath the waves. The jewel in this frozen crown was Beringia. Today, the Bering Strait separates Alaska from Siberia by 55 miles of icy water. But for 100,000 years, this was a grassland twice the size of Texas. Not a narrow bridge, but a vast country in its own right, stretching 1,000 miles north to south. Archaeological evidence from Lake E5 in Alaska reveals something stunning. Humans didn't just cross Beringia, they lived there for thousands of years. Recent studies show distinctive genetic markers in Native Americans that could only develop if their ancestors spent millennia isolated in Beringia before spreading south. They weren't trapped, they were home. The landscape would make modern humans gasp. The Mammoth Steppe, a unique ecosystem that no longer exists, stretched from Ireland to the Yukon. Neither tundra nor grassland, but something in between. Nutritious grasses, herbs, and Arctic willows fed the greatest concentration of large animals Earth has ever known. A single square mile could support mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, horses, bison, reindeer, musk oxen, and antelope. Lions twice the size of African lions, bears that dwarfed modern grizzlies, wolves with bone-crushing jaws. This wasn't a barren wasteland. It was the Serengeti on steroids. The numbers boggle the mind. Paleontologist Dale Guthrie calculated that the Mammoth Steppe supported 10 times the animal biomass of modern African savannas. Where the Serengeti might have 1 ton of animals per square kilometer, the Mammoth Steppe had 10. But perhaps the most extraordinary feature was the light. With sea levels down, Earth's reflectivity changed. Clear skies dominated. Summers brought 24-hour daylight to vast regions. Winters were brutal but dry. Siberia received less snow than Chicago gets today. This created perfect conditions for grazing animals, and where prey thrived, humans followed. At Yana River in Siberia, 32,000 years ago, humans built a settlement at 71 degrees north, 500 miles above the Arctic Circle. Not a temporary camp, but a permanent town with hundreds of artifacts. They didn't just survive the Arctic, they chose it. This transformed world created opportunities unimaginable today. You could walk from Paris to New York, trade routes stretched from Scotland to Siberia without crossing water. Ideas, genes, and innovations flowed across continents. The Ice Age Earth wasn't our planet wrapped in a white blanket. It was a different world entirely, and humans didn't huddle at its edges. Picture this. You're standing at the mouth of a cave in what will one day become France, but 40,000 years ago, it's a frozen wasteland where the wrong meal could mean death. The woman beside you isn't randomly grabbing whatever she can find. She's making calculated decisions based on knowledge passed down through generations. She knows which roots won't kill her children, which berries provide the most energy, and most importantly, she knows that survival isn't just about the mammoth steaks everyone talks about. Welcome to the real story of Ice Age nutrition, where our ancestors weren't just surviving on meat alone, but orchestrating one of the most sophisticated dietary strategies in human history. Forget everything Hollywood taught you about cavemen gnawing on giant bones. The truth is far more fascinating and far more complex. The plant revolution, hiding in plain sight, changes everything we thought we knew about prehistoric diets. Dr. Amanda Henry's microscopic analysis of 40,000-year-old dental plaque reveals something that should make every modern nutritionist take notes. Neanderthals and early humans were eating their vegetables, not just occasionally, but systematically, strategically, and with knowledge that would put most modern foragers to shame. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, 50,000-year-old Neanderthal teeth contain traces of chamomile and yarrow. These aren't food plants, they're medicine. Bitter, unpalatable, but therapeutic. Someone knew exactly what they were doing when they chewed these plants. This wasn't accidental consumption. This was prehistoric pharmacy in action. The starch revolution tells an even more remarkable story. Ground stone tools appear across Europe 30,000 years ago, not for hunting, not for cutting, but for processing plants. These weren't crude implements. Some grinding stones weigh 50 pounds and show polish from thousands of hours of use. Microscopic analysis reveals they were processing cattail roots, wild carrots, and dozens of other plants we're only beginning to identify. But here's where it gets truly mind-blowing. Some of these plant starches show evidence of cooking. They've been gelatinized by heat, meaning Ice Age humans weren't just gathering plants, they were transforming them through cooking, making nutrients more available. This is food science from 30,000 years ago. Consider the knowledge required. Which roots are safe after processing? Which seeds become toxic when old? Which berries can be dried for winter storage? Where do you dig for tubers under 3 feet of snow? This wasn't casual plant gathering. This was botanical expertise that took generations to accumulate. At Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, the evidence becomes overwhelming. Here, 30,000 years ago, someone built what can only be called a processing facility. Multiple grinding stones, some weighing more than a person, show wear patterns that tell a specific story. Circular motions for seeds, back and forth grinding for roots, different stones for different plants. This wasn't subsistence gathering. This was systematic food processing on an almost industrial scale. The genius lay in timing and preparation. Many of these plants required specific processing to be edible. Acorns need leaching to remove toxic tannins. Certain roots must be cooked to break down indigestible starches. Seeds require grinding to access nutrients. Our ancestors had mastered techniques that modern survivalists struggle to replicate. But plants were just one part of a much larger nutritional puzzle. The fat revolution reveals why Ice Age humans prioritized certain hunting strategies over others. Dr. John Speth's research on optimal foraging theory shows that in cold environments, fat becomes more valuable than protein. Humans can only derive about 30% of their calories from protein before experiencing protein poisoning. The remaining 70% had to come from fat and carbohydrates. This changes everything about how we understand Ice Age hunting. They weren't just going after the biggest animals, they were targeting the fattest. Mammoth hunting wasn't about impressive trophy kills. It was about accessing the most calorie-dense resource available. A single mammoth provided enough fat to sustain a band through an entire winter. The bone marrow obsession makes perfect sense in this context. Archaeological sites show systematic bone breaking, not for tools, but for marrow extraction. Marrow contains up to 90% fat and was so valuable that specialized tools were developed just for cracking bones efficiently. At some sites, Every single long bone shows evidence of marrow extraction. This wasn't waste not, want not mentality. This was targeting the most nutritionally dense part of the animal. But fat acquisition went beyond large game. At Kostenki in Russia, archaeologists found evidence of something remarkable: systematic fat rendering. Hearths designed specifically for melting fat from bones, with collection vessels and storage pits. They were creating prehistoric lard, storing concentrated calories for lean times. The aquatic revolution adds another layer to this nutritional complexity. While we focused on terrestrial hunting, coastal populations had discovered something equally valuable: the ocean's bounty. At Ertebøl sites in Denmark, 8,000-year-old shell middens tell the story of people who had mastered marine resource exploitation. But this wasn't just coastal gathering. At Pinnacle Point in South Africa, 164,000-year-old sites show systematic shellfish harvesting during glacial periods when inland resources crashed. These weren't desperate measures, they were calculated strategies. Shellfish provide crucial minerals like zinc and iodine, often scarce in terrestrial diets. The fish technology reveals sophisticated understanding of aquatic ecosystems. Bonefish hooks 16,000 years old from Spain show careful crafting and standardized design. Net weights appear in standardized sizes, suggesting organized fishing operations. These weren't individual anglers, they were coordinated fishing expeditions capable of harvesting hundreds of fish during spawning runs. Most remarkably, isotope analysis of coastal human remains shows marine proteins making up 50% of the diet in some populations. Not occasionally, but consistently for generations. These people weren't land hunters who occasionally ate fish. They were maritime specialists who had discovered the ocean's reliability. The seasonal synchronization reveals the true genius of Ice Age nutrition. Rather than random opportunistic feeding, our ancestors had developed sophisticated seasonal rounds. Spring meant fish runs and early greens. Summer brought berries and root vegetables. Fall was nut gathering and fat accumulation. Winter required stored foods and continued hunting. At Pinsevent in France, 12,000-year-old sites show this seasonal coordination in action. Reindeer bones from autumn kills, processed plant remains from summer gathering, stored nuts from fall collection. This wasn't hand-to-mouth survival. It was annual nutritional planning that would impress modern dietitians. The processing revolution shows how they maximized nutritional extraction from every resource. Bone grease production involved boiling crushed bones for hours to extract every calorie. Pemmican-like concentrated foods mixed fat, protein, and berries into portable high-energy packages. Food storage techniques using permafrost as natural refrigeration. But perhaps most remarkably, they had solved the vitamin C problem that puzzles modern nutritionists. How do you avoid scurvy when fresh fruits and vegetables aren't available for months? The answer lay in organ meats, particularly liver and kidneys, consumed raw or lightly cooked. These provide substantial vitamin C, especially when fresh. Additionally, certain preserved plant foods and fermented preparations could maintain vitamin levels through winter. The Neanderthal dietary data provides a fascinating comparison. Dental calculus from El Cedron in Spain reveals a heavily plant-based diet, including mushrooms, nuts, and moss. Meanwhile, Neanderthals from Belgium show almost exclusively meat consumption. This wasn't species-wide dietary uniformity. It was sophisticated regional adaptation to local resources. The cooking revolution transformed everything. Evidence of controlled fire use for food preparation appears 400,000 years ago, but sophisticated cooking techniques emerged during the Ice Age. Hearths designed for specific cooking methods, stone boiling using hot rocks in hide-lined pits, smoking and drying techniques for food preservation. Cooking didn't just make food safer, it made more nutrients available. Cooked tubers provide more digestible starch. Cooked meat is easier to chew and digest. Cooked bones release more fat and minerals. This wasn't just food preparation, it was nutritional optimization. The tools tell their own story. Specialized implements for every aspect of food processing, grinding stones for plant preparation, bone crackers for marrow extraction, scrapers for hide processing, cutting tools designed for specific butchering techniques. This wasn't a simple toolkit. It was a sophisticated food processing technology. The social dimensions of Ice Age nutrition reveal coordinated food sharing systems. At Mezmaiskaya Cave, food remains show systematic distribution across multiple family groups. No one hoarded, so everyone shared. This wasn't communist ideology, it was survival mathematics. Today's successful hunter feeds tomorrow's unsuccessful one. The nutritional profile of the Ice Age diet was remarkably well balanced when viewed seasonally. High-quality protein from game, essential fatty acids from fish and organ meats, complex carbohydrates from processed plants, vitamins and minerals from diverse sources. Modern attempts to recreate this diet often focus too narrowly on meat, missing the sophisticated plant knowledge that made it sustainable. The health implications were profound. Skeletal remains show Ice Age humans were generally taller, stronger, and had better dental health than early agricultural populations. Cavities appear in only 1.5% of hunter-gatherer teeth compared to 10.85% in post-agricultural populations. This wasn't just good genetics, it was optimal nutrition. The diversity was staggering. At Ohala II in Israel, 23,000-year-old grinding stones contain residues from over 140 plant species. This wasn't limited plant consumption, it was botanical mastery. Every edible plant in the environment was known, processed, and utilized. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect was the knowledge systems that supported this nutritional complexity. Information about seasonal availability, processing techniques, storage methods, and preparation was encoded in stories, songs, and ceremonies. This wasn't just food knowledge, it was cultural technology that ensured survival information passed between generations. The Ice Age diet wasn't primitive or limited. It was a sophisticated nutritional strategy that supported human expansion across the globe, brain development that made us who we are, and survival through the harshest conditions our species has ever faced. Our ancestors didn't just eat to survive the Ice Age, they ate to thrive in it. Modern nutritional science is still catching up to innovations developed 40,000 years ago. Seasonal eating, organ meat consumption, fermented foods, diverse plant incorporation, optimal fat to protein ratios. These weren't discoveries of modern science. They were rediscoveries of ancient wisdom. The next time someone suggests our ancestors lived on mammoth steaks alone, remember the grinding stones of Dolny Vestonich, the fish hooks of coastal Spain, the medicinal plants of Shanidar Cave. In the depths of winter, 20,000 years ago, a young woman named Kira crouches beside a frozen stream in what will one day be called Germany. Her breath forms crystalline clouds in the -30 air as she carefully extracts something from beneath the ice. It's not what you'd expect. Not meat, not the mammoth steaks your textbooks promised. It's a cluster of cattail roots, each one painstakingly located by memory, dug from beneath 2 feet of snow and ice. She'll spend the next 3 hours processing these roots into flour using grinding stones her grandmother taught her to use. This scene, repeated countless times across Ice Age Europe, reveals a truth that shatters everything we thought we knew about caveman cuisine. The plants were always there. We just weren't looking hard enough. Dr. Amanda Henry at the Max Planck Institute has spent the last decade scraping 30,000-year-old dental plaque from Neanderthal teeth. What she found revolutionized our understanding of Ice Age nutrition. Thus, supposedly pure carnivores were eating their vegetables, lots of them. The microscopic evidence trapped in fossilized plaque tells an incredible story. Starch grains from dozens of plant species, evidence of cooking, proof that even during Earth's deepest freeze, humans maintained botanical knowledge that puts modern foragers to shame. But let's start with what we got right: the megafauna. Because yes, Ice Age humans did hunt mammoth, but not the way Hollywood imagined. Recent research by UC Berkeley's Scott Byram just overturned decades of assumptions about Clovis hunting. Those beautiful fluted spear points weren't hurled at charging beasts by brave warriors. They were pikes planted in the ground, angled perfectly to let a 9-ton mammoth impale itself with its own momentum. It's physics, not bravery. The kind of physics that requires generations of accumulated knowledge about animal behavior, migration patterns, and biomechanics. At the Lubbock Lake site in Texas, archaeologists found evidence of this technique preserved in stone. Clovis points with impact fractures that could only come from massive force. Not the force a human arm could generate, but the force of a charging mammoth driving itself onto a precisely positioned blade. The hunters weren't heroes, they were engineers, and their engineering was so effective it may have driven the mammoth to extinction. But here's where the story gets complicated. That mammoth provided enough meat to feed a band of 30 people for months. But humans can only derive about 30% of their calories from protein before rabbit starvation sets in, a condition where you literally starve to death on lean meat. The other 70% each had to come from somewhere else. Fat, yes. The marrow from those mammoth bones was liquid gold, providing concentrated calories essential for surviving sub-zero temperatures, but also carbohydrates. And that's where the real survival story begins. At Ohala the Two in Israel, archaeologists uncovered something that shouldn't exist. A 23,000-year-old site with grinding stones containing residue from over 140 different plant species. Not 10, not 20, 140. Each plant had its season, its preparation method, its specific use. Some were food, others were medicine, many were both. The knowledge required to utilize this botanical pharmacy would take a lifetime to accumulate, maybe several lifetimes. Consider what this means. While popular culture imagines Ice Age humans as crude hunters dragging mammoth carcasses back to caves, the reality was far more sophisticated. They were botanists, pharmacists, food scientists. They knew which roots became toxic after the first frost, which berries could be dried for winter storage, which bark contained compounds that fought infection. This wasn't casual knowledge picked up through trial and error. This was a systematic understanding of plant chemistry that we're only beginning to appreciate. The evidence comes from the most unlikely source, fossilized dental plaque. What we once dismissed as prehistoric garbage turns out to be a time capsule. Using new extraction techniques, researchers can identify individual plant cells, starch grains, even pollen trapped in this biological cement. Dr. Karen Hardy's team at the Autonomous University of Barcelona made a startling discovery. Some of these plant starches show evidence of cooking. They've been gelatinized by heat. Ice Age humans weren't just gathering plants, they were transforming them through cooking, making nutrients more available and toxins less dangerous. The Neanderthals of El Cidrón cave in Spain tell an even more remarkable story. Dental calculus analysis revealed they were consuming chamomile and yarrow. Neither has nutritional value. Both are bitter. Both are medicine. These weren't desperate people eating anything they could find. These were sophisticated healers who understood the pharmacological properties of plants 50,000 years ago. They were self-medicating with natural compounds that modern science is still studying. But plants who weren't just medicine, they were engineering materials. At Schöningen in Germany, 400,000-year-old wooden spears reveal something extraordinary. These weren't crude pointed sticks. They were precision instruments, balanced like modern javelins, with the center of gravity positioned for maximum throwing effectiveness. The wood was carefully selected, spruce for the shaft, yew for the point, each species chosen for specific mechanical properties. This level of material science requires deep understanding of plant biology and physics. The seasonal round reveals another layer of complexity. Ice Age humans didn't just know what to eat, they knew when to eat it. Spring brought tender shoots and early greens, providing vitamins after a winter of stored foods. Summer meant berries, nuts, and the peak growing season for roots and tubers. Fall was harvest time, when communities gathered to process massive quantities of plant foods for winter storage. Even winter had its botanical resources: inner bark from certain trees, stored nuts and dried berries, roots that could be dug from beneath snow. At Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, archaeologists found evidence of this seasonal planning preserved in 26,000-year-old hearths. Grinding stones weighing 50 pounds show polish from thousands of hours of use. Microscopic analysis reveals they were processing everything from grass seeds to lily bulbs to hazelnuts, different stones for different plants, different techniques for different seasons. This wasn't casual food preparation. This was systematic processing on an almost industrial scale. The nutritional implications are staggering. Modern nutritionists struggle to design diets that provide all essential nutrients from whole foods. Ice Age humans, it did it routinely. Meat provided protein and B vitamins. Organs supplied vitamin A and essential minerals. Plants contributed vitamin C, fiber, and complex carbohydrates. Nuts and seeds offered healthy fats and vitamin E. Berries delivered antioxidants and natural sugars. It was a complete nutritional system developed through millennia of trial and error. But perhaps the most ingenious adaptation was psychological. Plants weren't just food and medicine, they were variety. Imagine eating nothing but mammoth steak for months. The human palate craves diversity. Those 140 plant species at Ohelovitsekte weren't just nutritional insurance, they were flavor insurance. Bitter greens, sweet berries, pungent roots, aromatic herbs. Ice Age cuisine had complexity that puts modern fast food to shame. The evidence of cooking sophistication continues to emerge. At Kesem Cave in Israel, 400,000-year-old hearths show controlled use of fire for food preparation, not just roasting meat, pit cooking, steam cooking using hot stones and water, smoking for preservation. These techniques required understanding of food chemistry, heat transfer, and preservation methods. They were gourmet chefs working with Stone Age tools. Regional variations reveal local expertise. Mediterranean populations exploited different plant resources than Arctic ones. Desert dwellers knew water-storing succulents and drought-resistant seeds. Forest peoples understood tree nuts and woodland herbs. Each environment demanded specialized knowledge. Each ecosystem offered unique opportunities. The diversity of human plant use mirrors the diversity of human environments during the Ice Age. The toolkit for plant processing was as sophisticated as hunting equipment. Digging sticks for extracting roots, baskets for gathering and transport, grinding stones for processing seeds and nuts, mortars and pestles for crushing berries and extracting oils. Each tool represented generations of refinement. Each technique encoded solutions to specific processing challenges. Storage technology reveals long-term planning that contradicts the hand-to-mouth existence we often imagine. Underground pits lined with stones for root storage, elevated platforms for drying berries, sealed containers made from animal stomachs for preserving processed foods. Some storage sites show evidence of use across multiple seasons, suggesting return visits to cached resources. This isn't opportunistic gathering, this is resource management. The social aspects of plant gathering created community bonds that hunting couldn't match. While hunting often involved small groups of specialists, plant gathering included everyone. Children learned by following adults. Grandmothers passed down location knowledge spanning decades. Men and women worked together during intensive processing seasons. These activities built the social networks that held Ice Age communities together. Modern hunter-gatherer societies provide glimpses into this lost world. The Hadza of Tanzania use over 300 plant species. Australian Aboriginal groups know thousands of edible and medicinal plants. These cultures maintain knowledge systems that took millennia to develop. Ice Age Europeans likely possessed similar expertise, adapted to their unique environments and challenges. The tragic irony is how much knowledge was lost. When agricultural societies replaced hunter-gatherers, most botanical wisdom vanished. The plants were still there. The knowledge to use them wasn't. We went from knowing hundreds of useful species to depending on a few dozen crops. From understanding complex ecological relationships to simplistic monocultures. From sustainable harvesting to resource depletion. Climate change during the Ice Age created both challenges and opportunities for plant use. As conditions shifted, species distributions changed. Plants that were abundant in one millennium might be rare in the next. Human survival depended on adaptive knowledge systems that could incorporate new species while maintaining traditional wisdom. This flexibility may have been humanity's greatest asset during environmental upheaval. The medicinal applications were particularly sophisticated. Modern pharmaceutical research continues discovering active compounds in plants Ice Age humans used therapeutically. Willow bark contains salicin, the precursor to aspirin. Digitalis from foxglove treats heart conditions. Taxol from yew trees fights cancer. Our ancestors knew these plants had healing properties. They just didn't know why. The practical knowledge preceded scientific understanding by tens of thousands of years. Fermentation technology may have ancient roots. Some evidence suggests Ice Age humans understood how to process certain plants through controlled fermentation, making nutrients more available and creating alcoholic beverages. The social and nutritional implications of this technology would have been profound, creating new food preservation methods and possibly new social rituals. The environmental impact of human plant use was generally sustainable. Unlike agriculture, which transforms entire landscapes, hunter-gatherer plant use worked within existing ecosystems. Careful harvesting actually enhanced plant communities through selective pressure and seed dispersal. Humans weren't just extracting resources, they were participating in ecological relationships that benefited multiple species. Today, as we face our own environmental challenges, perhaps it's time to rediscover some of this ancient wisdom, not to return to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, but to remember that plants offer more than decoration and timber. They're food, medicine, materials, and partners in sustainable living. The Ice Age teaches us that human survival has always depended on botanical knowledge. That knowledge may be more valuable than ever. The young woman Kira processes her cattail roots into flour that will help her family survive another week of winter. She doesn't know she's part of a knowledge system that spans continents and millennia. She just knows the plants. And in knowing them, she ensures that humans will not just survive the Ice Age, but emerge from it with the botanical wisdom needed to build civilization itself. But while we've been obsessed with mammoth hunters living off pure meat, the real story emerging from archaeological sites across Ice Age Europe tells us something completely different. Your ancestors weren't just carnivores desperately chasing megafauna across frozen wastelands. They were sophisticated nutritionists who understood something we're only rediscovering today. Survival isn't about having one perfect food source. It's about creating a system that works no matter what nature throws at you. Dr. Amanda Henry's laboratory at the Max Planck Institute holds evidence that shatters our meat-obsessed stereotypes. Under her microscope, 40,000-year-old dental plaque reveals something extraordinary: starch granules, plant fibers, and pollen grains. Lots of them. These Ice Age humans weren't just eating plants occasionally. They were processing them systematically, grinding roots and tubers with stone tools that show thousands of hours of wear. The revolution began when researchers realized they'd been looking in the wrong places. While animal bones preserve beautifully in archaeological sites, plant remains disappear almost immediately unless they're trapped in very specific conditions. But dental calculus, that hardened plaque on teeth that your dentist scrapes away, acts like a time capsule. It preserves microscopic evidence of everything our ancestors ate, creating a dietary record that spans millennia. At Spy Cave in Belgium, Neanderthal teeth from 36,000 years ago tell a remarkable story. Yes, they were eating woolly rhinoceros and wild sheep, but they were also consuming chamomile, yarrow, and poplar. These aren't foods, they're medicines. Chamomile for inflammation, yarrow for wounds, poplar bark containing compounds similar to aspirin. These weren't desperate humans eating anything they could find. They were practicing prehistoric pharmacy. The plant knowledge required staggers the modern imagination. Which roots become edible after cooking versus those that remain toxic? Which berries can be dried for winter storage? Which bark contains medicinal compounds? Where do you dig for tubers when snow covers the ground for 8 months? This wasn't casual foraging. It was botanical expertise that would challenge modern survivalists. At Ohelo the Tomb in Israel, archaeologists uncovered a 23,000-year-old processing site that looks more like a prehistoric food laboratory than a simple campsite. Grinding stones, some weighing over 50 pounds, show polish from processing thousands of different seeds and roots. The site contained evidence of over 140 different plant species being systematically processed. This wasn't supplemental nutrition, this was industrial-scale plant food production. But here's where the story gets really interesting. The technology required to make plants edible during the Ice Age was incredibly sophisticated. Many of the roots and tubers available in glacial Europe were tough, fibrous, and often toxic when raw. Processing them required specific techniques: grinding to break down cellular walls, leaching to remove toxins, fermentation to increase nutritional value, and controlled cooking to gelatinize starches. The famous Venus figurines found across Ice Age Europe might actually be cookbooks. Recent analysis suggests the intricate patterns carved on these figurines could represent different plant processing techniques, seasonal availability guides, or even recipes passed down through generations. What we've interpreted as art might actually be the world's first instruction manuals. Consider the mathematics of Ice Age nutrition. The human brain consumes about 20% of our daily calories, twice the rate of other primates. That's roughly 400 to 500 calories per day just to keep our oversized brains functioning. Meat provides protein and fat, but brains run primarily on glucose, and the most efficient source of glucose is starch from plants. Without adequate carbohydrates, the body must convert protein to glucose through a metabolically expensive process that can't sustain brain function long term. As human brains expanded during the Ice Age, we needed more efficient ways to obtain calories. Cooking revolutionized plant nutrition by breaking down tough cellular structures and making starches more bioavailable. A cooked tuber provides 3 times more usable calories than a raw one. This technological breakthrough didn't just supplement the diet, it enabled human brain evolution. The seasonal timing was crucial. Spring brought tender shoots and early greens rich in vitamins after winter's scurvy-inducing diet. Summer offered berries, fruits, and seed heads that could be processed and stored. Fall was harvest time for nuts, roots, and tubers that would sustain communities through winter. Even winter had its plant foods: inner bark from certain trees, stored roots from underground caches, and evergreen needles rich in vitamin C. Storage technology reveals the sophistication of Ice Age plant use. At Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, archaeologists found underground storage pits lined with mammoth hide and sealed with clay. These weren't for meat storage, they were root cellars, using the permafrost as refrigeration to preserve processed plant foods through the harsh winter months. Some pits contained the remains of ground meal, suggesting these communities were making something remarkably similar to flour 30,000 years before agriculture. The tools tell their own story. Mortars and pestles appear in the archaeological record 30,000 years ago, not for making weapons or processing hides, but for grinding plant materials. The wear patterns are distinctive: circular motions for seeds, back and forth grinding for roots, specialized grooves for stripping berries from branches. Each tool was optimized for specific plant processing tasks. But perhaps most remarkably, Ice Age humans understood something that modern nutritionists are rediscovering. Plants aren't just calories, they're medicine. The medicinal plants found in Neanderthal dental calculus weren't randomly consumed. Chamomile appears consistently during what isotope analysis suggests were periods of illness or injury. Yarrow residues correlate with evidence of wounds or infections. These early humans had developed a sophisticated understanding of plant-based medicine. The diversity of plant foods was staggering. Cattail roots provided starch similar to potatoes. Wild carrots and parsnips offered sugars and vitamins. Hazelnuts and other tree nuts provided crucial fats and proteins. Wild grains, where available, were ground into meal. Even pine inner bark, rich in sugars and vitamin C, became emergency food during the harshest periods. Modern experiments by archaeologist Dr. Peter Bagucki demonstrate the nutritional power of Ice Age plant processing. A single day's work by a small group could process enough cattail roots to provide 15,000 calories of stored food. That's a week's worth of energy for an adult, extracted from plants most modern people would walk past without recognition. The cooking revolution that began during the Ice Age transformed plant nutrition in ways we're still discovering. Controlled burning created nutrient-rich ash that could be mixed with water to create lye for processing acorns and other tannic plants. Pit cooking using heated stones could slowly roast tough roots over days, breaking down complex carbohydrates into easily digestible sugars. Fermentation techniques evidenced by specialized pottery could increase the nutritional value of plant foods while preserving them for extended periods. Regional specialization developed as communities mastered local plant resources. Mediterranean populations became experts in processing wild olives and grapes. Northern European groups specialized in hazelnuts and wild grains. Arctic populations learned to extract maximum nutrition from seaweeds and Arctic willows. Each region developed its own botanical expertise, passed down through generations of accumulated knowledge. The social implications were profound. Plant processing was often communal work, requiring coordination and shared knowledge. Unlike hunting, which could be done by small groups, many plant processing tasks required community cooperation. Grinding grain, leaching toxins from acorns, and managing controlled burns for cooking required social organization and shared expertise. Women likely played crucial roles in this plant-based revolution. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherers show that women typically provide 60-80% of the calories through plant gathering and processing, despite the cultural emphasis on male hunting prowess. Ice Age communities probably followed similar patterns, with women's botanical knowledge being essential for community survival. The end of the Ice Age actually created nutritional challenges for human populations. As megafauna disappeared and climates changed, the plant knowledge accumulated over millennia became even more crucial. Communities that had maintained diverse plant processing techniques were better positioned to survive the transition to the Holocene than those that had specialized too heavily in hunting. Today, as we face our own environmental challenges, Ice Age plant processing offers valuable lessons. These communities achieved remarkable nutritional diversity using only stone tools and accumulated knowledge. They understood seasonal cycles, sustainable harvesting, and food preservation in ways that sustained them for thousands of years. Their success wasn't built on finding the one perfect superfood, but on creating resilient systems that could adapt to changing conditions. The stereotype of Ice Age humans as pure carnivores ignores half the survival equation. While mammoth hunting gets the headlines, it was the quiet revolution in plant processing that provided the stable, reliable nutrition base that allowed communities to thrive. The grinding stones, storage pits, and processing sites scattered across Ice Age Europe represent humanity's first systematic approach to nutrition, laying the groundwork for the agricultural revolution that would follow. Your ancestors weren't just hunters, they were botanists, nutritionists, and food scientists. They understood that survival wasn't about finding enough calories for today. It was about creating systems that could sustain communities through seasonal cycles, climate fluctuations, and resource variations. The bone scraper glides across the reindeer hide with practiced precision, each stroke removing another layer of fat and tissue. Her grandmother's hands, weathered by 60 winters, guide her movements with the same patience that has kept their family alive through countless frozen seasons. This isn't just hide preparation, this is survival engineering. And the knowledge flowing between these generations represents something far more sophisticated than we've ever imagined about Ice Age life. We've been telling ourselves the wrong story about our ancestors. While we picture desperate scavengers huddled around dying fires, the archaeological evidence reveals master technologists who didn't just survive the ice, they conquered it. These weren't primitive cave dwellers waiting for evolution to save them. They were innovators, artists, and engineers who developed survival systems so advanced that modern humans struggle to replicate them. At Pavlov Hills in the Czech Republic, archaeologists uncovered something that shattered decades of assumptions. Buried beneath 25,000 years of sediment lay not crude shelters, but engineered structures that would challenge modern architects. The site contained over 2,000 fired clay objects, including what researchers now recognize as the world's first ceramics. But these weren't decorative pots. They were technological marvels, fired at temperatures exceeding 800 degrees Celsius, designed for specific functions we're only beginning to understand. The genius lay in their multi-layered approach to survival. While we focus on the obvious, hunting and gathering, they had developed parallel systems that provided security, comfort, and even luxury in conditions that would kill modern humans in hours. Take their clothing technology. At Sungir in Russia, a burial from 34,000 years ago revealed garments that required over 2,500 hours to create. This wasn't desperation sewing, this was haute couture engineered for survival. But perhaps their greatest innovation was something we barely recognize as technology at all: their social systems. Recent analysis of Ice Age sites across Europe reveals something remarkable. These small bands maintained genetic diversity that shouldn't have been mathematically possible. The solution was breathtaking in scope, continent-spanning marriage networks that connected isolated groups across thousands of miles of frozen wilderness. The evidence comes from multiple sources. Strontium isotope analysis of teeth reveals where people grew up versus where they died. At sites across Europe, young adults show isotope signatures from regions hundreds of kilometers away. They were moving for marriage, creating diplomatic alliances that spanned entire continents. Shell beads from the Mediterranean, appear in sites near the Baltic Sea. Amber from northern regions shows up in southern caves. This wasn't random trade, it was systematic networking that prevented inbreeding while spreading innovations across vast distances. Consider the logistics. Young adults walking hundreds of kilometers through glaciated landscapes to find partners. But ethnographic evidence from recent hunter-gatherers shows similar patterns. Australian Aboriginal groups maintained marriage networks across continental scales. The difference is, our Ice Age ancestors did this during Earth's harshest climate period while maintaining technological sophistication that rivals modern capabilities. Their hunting technology reveals this same systematic approach, while popular imagination shows fur-clad humans throwing spears at charging mammoths. The reality was far more sophisticated. Recent research by UC Berkeley archaeologist Scott Byram revealed that famous Clovis points weren't thrown weapons at all. They were engineered as planted pikes, positioned strategically to use a charging animal's own momentum against it. The energy generated by a 9-ton mammoth impaling itself on a properly positioned spear far exceeds anything human arms could achieve. This required understanding animal behavior at a level that modern wildlife biologists would respect. They knew migration patterns, feeding habits, territorial boundaries, and seasonal behaviors of dozens of species. But more than that, they could predict and manipulate these behaviors, creating hunting scenarios where physics worked in their favor rather than against it. The plant knowledge was equally staggering. At Ohelo the Tenu in Israel, 23,000-year-old grinding stones contain residues from over 140 plant species. Each plant had its season, its location, its preparation method. Eat the wrong part, you die. Process it incorrectly, you starve. This wasn't casual knowledge. It represented libraries of information passed down through generations of careful observation and experimentation. Modern pharmaceutical companies spend millions trying to identify active compounds in plants that our ancestors used routinely. Dental calculus from Neanderthal teeth contains compounds from medicinal plants, chamomile for inflammation, poplar bark containing aspirin precursors. They weren't just finding food, they were practicing medicine at a molecular level without understanding molecules. Their understanding of materials science was equally advanced. They knew that heating certain stones to precise temperatures transformed their molecular structure, making brittle materials workable. They developed composite tools using multiple materials, each chosen for specific properties: sinew for flexibility, pitch for waterproofing, specific bone types for different tool functions. They were materials engineers working at the atomic level with Stone Age technology. Perhaps most remarkably, they understood sustainability in ways that modern civilization struggles with. Ice Age sites show continuous occupation for thousands of years without environmental degradation. They managed resources on cyclical patterns that maintained ecosystem health while supporting human populations. When resources in one area showed stress, they moved, allowing recovery. This wasn't random wandering, it was sophisticated resource management that kept both human and animal populations stable across millennia. The art they created during this period wasn't primitive decoration, it was information technology. Cave paintings served as field guides, encoding animal behavior, seasonal patterns, and hunting strategies in visual form that could be transmitted across generations. The acoustic properties of painted caves suggest these were multimedia presentations, combining visual information with sound effects created by the cave's natural resonance. Musical instruments from this period show standardization that suggests mass production techniques. Bone flutes were manufactured using mathematical ratios that produce consistent scales. This wasn't individual craftsmanship, it was systematic technology transfer that maintained quality control across different manufacturing sites. Their storage and preservation techniques enabled them to maintain food security through seasonal variations that would challenge modern supply chains. They used permafrost as natural refrigeration, developed smoking and drying techniques that preserved meat for months, and created ceramic storage vessels that kept plant foods viable through long winters. Underground cache sites served as prehistoric warehouses, strategically positioned along travel routes to support long-distance movement. The population genetics of Ice Age humans reveals something that overturns our assumptions about primitive life. Despite small band sizes and apparent isolation, they maintained genetic diversity that exceeds many modern populations. The mechanism was their marriage network system, but the result was populations that were healthier, more disease-resistant, and genetically more robust than their agricultural descendants. Skeletal analysis shows that Ice Age humans were taller, stronger, and had better bone density than humans who came after agriculture. Their teeth show fewer cavities, their bones show fewer nutritional deficiencies, and their overall health indicators suggest populations that were thriving, not merely surviving. The transition to agriculture actually decreased human health metrics across multiple measures, a decline that took thousands of years to reverse. This challenges our fundamental narrative about human progress. We assume that technological advancement equals improvement in human welfare. But the evidence suggests that Ice Age hunter-gatherers achieved higher levels of health, social cooperation, and environmental sustainability than most subsequent civilizations. They didn't need to be rescued by agriculture. They were forced into it by climate change that made their sophisticated hunting and gathering systems impossible to maintain. The implications extend beyond archaeology into modern survival preparation and sustainable living. Military survival training still uses techniques developed during the Ice Age. Arctic expeditions rely on clothing designs that mirror Ice Age innovations. Modern permaculture and sustainable agriculture movements are rediscovering resource management principles that Ice Age humans mastered 30,000 years ago. Their social technologies offer insights into cooperation, conflict resolution, and community organization that remain relevant today. They maintained peaceful, egalitarian societies for thousands of years without formal government, police, or military systems. Their methods of decision-making, resource sharing, and dispute resolution enabled groups to function cohesively under extreme stress without devolving into violence or authoritarianism. The Ice Age wasn't humanity's dark age, it was our golden age of innovation. Every survival technique, every social system, every piece of technology that enabled civilization was forged in the crucible of the last glacial period. The humans who emerged from that ice weren't primitive ancestors waiting for enlightenment. They were master survivors whose knowledge systems sustained our species through Earth's harshest conditions. As we face our own climate challenges, resource limitations, and social fragmentation, perhaps the greatest lesson from our Ice Age ancestors isn't what they lacked, but what they mastered. They proved that humans can maintain sophisticated, sustainable, healthy societies even under the most extreme environmental stress. They didn't just survive the Ice Age, they thrived in it, creating technologies and social systems that supported human flourishing for over 30,000 years. The next time you see an artist's rendering of a fur-clad caveman struggling through the snow, remember that you're looking at a master engineer, a pharmaceutical researcher, a materials scientist, a wildlife biologist, a social coordinator, and a systems thinker whose knowledge enabled your existence. But here's the twist that changes everything. Food preservation wasn't just about surviving winter, it was about creating abundance in the world's harshest conditions. While most animals struggled to find their next meal, Ice Age humans were stockpiling resources like prehistoric Amazon warehouses. At Doni Vestonici, archaeologists uncovered something that shouldn't exist: organized storage facilities, 26,000 years old, containing thousands of pounds of preserved meat fat and plant materials. These weren't desperate people hoarding scraps. These were logistics experts managing supply chains across seasons. The technology was breathtaking in its simplicity and effectiveness. Natural refrigeration became humanity's first industrial revolution. Permafrost zones created freezers that never failed underground caches, preserved meat for months, even years. At Kostany in Russia, storage pits carved into permanently frozen ground contained mammoth steaks still edible after 25,000 years. But the real genius lay in processing techniques that transformed perishable resources into shelf-stable foods. Fat rendering operations at sites like Mezin reveal systematic processing of mammoth blubber into concentrated energy stores. One mammoth could yield 200 pounds of rendered fat, equivalent to 400,000 calories of stored energy. That's enough to sustain a family of 4 for 2 months. The rendering process itself shows sophisticated understanding of temperature control and contamination prevention. Archaeological evidence shows specialized hearths designed for fat processing, separate from cooking fires to prevent spoilage. Smoking and drying techniques created prehistoric jerky that could last for years. At Pinsevent in France, archaeologists found racks of wooden poles with cut marks suggesting systematic meat drying operations. The cut patterns on reindeer bones show precise butchering designed to maximize surface area for drying. These weren't random cuts, they were engineered for preservation efficiency. Thin strips of meat, dried in Arctic air, could be stored in waterproof containers made from animal bladders or bark. But perhaps, most remarkably, Ice Age humans invented fermentation. At Shanidar Cave, evidence suggests controlled fermentation of plant materials, creating foods that were not only preserved, but actually more nutritious than their fresh counterparts. Fermented roots and berries provided probiotics that supported digestive health, crucial for processing the high-protein Ice Age diet. The fermentation process also created new flavors and textures, transforming bitter roots into palatable foods. The scale of food storage operations staggers modern understanding. At Predmosty, a single site contained evidence of processing over 1,000 mammoths across multiple occupations. The bone accumulations aren't random kills, they're the remains of systematic harvesting and processing operations. Cut mark analysis shows standardized butchering techniques passed down through generations. These people had developed industrial scale food processing 30,000 years before agriculture. Underground storage systems reveal even more sophistication. Cache pits lined with stones and sealed with clay created airtight environments that prevented spoilage. Some pits show evidence of multiple use cycles, suggesting multi-generational storage strategies. Families weren't just planning for next winter, they were creating multi-year food security systems. The distribution of storage sites reveals something profound about Ice Age society. Storage facilities cluster along migration routes and resource extraction sites, creating networks of supply depots. This wasn't individual hoarding, it was community-level resource management. Isotope analysis shows people were accessing stored foods from multiple locations, suggesting shared resource networks spanning hundreds of kilometers. Seasonal timing was everything. Archaeological evidence shows intensive processing activities during specific times of year when resources were most abundant. Reindeer hunting camps show evidence of mass processing during migration periods when hundreds of animals could be taken in short time frames. Plant processing intensified during late summer when roots and berries reached peak nutritional content. The preservation techniques created dietary diversity that seems impossible for Ice Age conditions. Stored foods included mammoth fat reindeer, jerky dried fish, fermented berries, processed roots, and even preserved insects. Chemical analysis of storage containers reveals traces of over 40 different food types at some sites. This wasn't subsistence. This was cuisine maintained year-round through sophisticated preservation technology. Quality control systems ensured food safety across months of storage. Evidence suggests Ice Age humans understood spoilage indicators and had developed testing methods to determine food safety. Storage containers show evidence of regular inspection and maintenance. Some sites reveal disposal areas for spoiled foods, indicating systematic quality management. The social implications were revolutionary. Reliable food storage meant groups could support larger populations, maintain permanent settlements, and invested time in non-subsistence activities. Art music and complex tool-making flourished at sites with extensive storage facilities. Food security created cultural security, allowing human creativity to explode. Storage technology also enabled long-distance travel and exploration. Portable preserved foods allowed small groups to venture into unknown territories for weeks or months. The colonization of new continents was fueled by concentrated portable nutrition that could sustain explorers across vast distances. Most remarkably, food preservation created the first true wealth accumulation in human history. Stored resources represented invested labor and future security. Archaeological evidence suggests some individuals or families controlled larger storage operations, creating the first economic inequality. But this wasn't hoarding for hoarding's sake. It was investment in community survival. The preservation revolution fundamentally changed human biology and behavior. Reliable food storage reduced seasonal stress cycles, allowing for more consistent nutrition. This may have contributed to increased brain size and cognitive development. Dental evidence shows Ice Age humans with extensive food storage had better nutrition and health outcomes than those without. Modern survival experts study Ice Age preservation techniques for insights into sustainable food systems. The technologies required no external energy sources, produced no waste, and could maintain food safety for extended periods. These techniques sustained human populations through the harshest climate conditions Earth has experienced since humans evolved. As we face modern challenges of food security and sustainability, the Ice Age storage revolution offers profound lessons. Our ancestors didn't just survive scarcity, they engineered abundance through technology innovation and cooperation. They proved that human ingenuity can transform limitation into opportunity, creating prosperity, even in Earth's most challenging conditions. Now, let me just catch myself up on what happened to the band that disappeared into the caves. When the final ice sheets melted 12,000 years ago, humanity faced its most successful extinction event. Not extinction of the species, but extinction of a way of life so perfect it had sustained us for 2,000 years. The band society that had conquered mammoths, created art, and spread across continents simply vanished within a few generations. The archaeological evidence tells a story of rapid, almost violent transformation. At sites across Europe, the tools change abruptly. The elegant backed bladelets designed for composite hunting weapons disappear. The delicate bone needles that created waterproof clothing vanish. Even the artistic tradition that had flourished for 30,000 years simply stops. Cave paintings end, Venus figurines cease, the musical instruments fall silent. Dr. Marek Zvelebil, studying this transition in Northern Europe, found something heartbreaking. The last hunter-gatherer sites show desperate innovation. They're creating new tools, new techniques, trying to adapt to a world that no longer supports their way of life. But the demographic math was against them. While a band of 30 could live comfortably on territory that might support 300 farmers, those farmers inevitably produced more children, more warriors, more pressure. The genetic evidence is stark. When farming populations spread across Europe 8,000 years ago, hunter-gatherer DNA didn't gradually blend with farmer DNA. It largely disappeared. Recent studies by Dr. Wolfgang Hack show that in some regions, up to 90% of the hunter-gatherer genetic lineage vanished within 500 years. These weren't peaceful transitions, they were replacements, but fragments survived. In the forests of northern Europe, the pitted ware culture maintained hunting and gathering alongside farms for over 1,000 years. They traded seal oil for grain, amber for pottery. Two worlds coexisting until farming's relentless demographic advantage finally overwhelmed them. The Sami people of northern Scandinavia maintained reindeer herding, a compromise between the old ways and the new. The Ainu of Japan preserved hunting and gathering traditions into historical times. The psychological transformation was perhaps more profound than the physical one. Band society was built on immediate return systems. You hunted today, you ate today. You helped someone today, they helped you tomorrow. Trust was personal and face-to-face, immediate. Agricultural society required delayed return systems. Plant today, harvest in months, store grain through winter, plan years ahead, trust abstract systems, chiefs you'd never meet, gods you couldn't see. Dr. Christopher Buom calls it humanity's great reversal. For 200,000 years, we had perfected egalitarian society. Everyone was equal, decisions were consensus-based, leadership was situational. Agriculture required hierarchy. Someone had to decide when to plant, how to distribute surplus, who controlled the granaries. The birth of kings, priests, and social classes wasn't corruption of human nature. It was adaptation to agricultural life. The health consequences were immediate and measurable. Skeletons from early agricultural sites show decreased height, increased tooth decay, and signs of malnutrition. Dr. Clark Spencer Larson's studies reveal that the first farmers suffered from diseases unknown to hunter-gatherers. Living in permanent settlements with domestic animals created new pathogen pools. Relying on single crops created vulnerability to famine. The varied, nutritious diet of the Ice Age was replaced by a monotonous reliance on grains. Yet the transformation was irreversible. By 5,000 years ago, farming had spread to every continent except Antarctica. The last major hunter-gatherer populations survived only in environments unsuitable for agriculture: deserts, Arctic tundra, dense forests. The modern world emerged from this agricultural revolution. Cities, writing, mathematics, art, music, literature, science, everything we call civilization flowed from the surplus calories that farming provided. The Ice Age way of life didn't just disappear, it was actively suppressed. Agricultural societies viewed hunter-gatherers as primitive, dangerous, obstacles to progress. Colonial governments worldwide forced nomadic peoples onto reservations, into schools, away from their traditional territories. The last free-roaming bands were eliminated or absorbed within the past century. Today, perhaps 300,000 people worldwide still live primarily by hunting and gathering. The Hadza of Tanzania, the San of southern Africa, scattered Amazon tribes, Arctic peoples maintaining traditional lifestyles. They're living museums of our species' original way of life. Studies of these groups reveal what we lost and what we gained in the Great Transformation. Modern hunter-gatherers work fewer hours than people in industrial societies. They have intimate knowledge of their environment that puts our specialized expertise to shame. They maintain social systems based on sharing and cooperation that most modern humans can barely comprehend. Their children learn through play and observation rather than formal instruction. They have no chiefs, no kings, no permanent inequality. But they also live with constant uncertainty. A bad hunting season means hunger. An injury can mean death. Their knowledge, however profound, dies with individuals. They can't accumulate resources beyond immediate needs. Their populations remain small, vulnerable to disease, climate change, and encroachment by agricultural societies. The great irony is that just as we've eliminated the last hunter-gatherer societies, we're beginning to understand what they achieved. Modern psychology recognizes that human happiness peaks at around 150 meaningful relationships, the size of several related bands. Our brains are wired for small group cooperation, not anonymous urban life. Depression and anxiety, rare in hunter-gatherer societies, plague modern populations despite our material abundance. Some attempt to recapture Ice Age wisdom. Paleo diets try to recreate hunter-gatherer nutrition. Barefoot running mimics our original locomotion. Forest bathing satisfies our need for nature. Meditation replaces fireside contemplation. Community gardens recreate gathering. CrossFit mimics hunting's varied movements. But these are fragments, attempts to reconcile Stone Age bodies with Space Age lives. The most profound loss may be psychological. Ice Age humans lived in a predictable world where survival depended on reading natural signs, understanding animal behavior, knowing plant cycles. Modern humans live in an unpredictable world where survival depends on abstract skills, distant institutions, global markets. We've gained control over our environment, but lost the sense of being part of it. As we face climate change, resource depletion, and social fragmentation, perhaps the Ice Age's greatest gift isn't what we gained or lost, but what we learned. Humans are infinitely adaptable. We survived the ice. We'll survive the heat. We survived the great melt. We'll survive whatever comes next. The question isn't whether we'll adapt, but what we'll become in the process. The last Ice Age hunter died long ago, but their DNA lives in all of us. Their adaptability, their ingenuity, their refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds, that's our inheritance. They proved that humans don't just endure catastrophe, we transform it into opportunity. They gave us not just survival, but the tools to thrive in any world we create. The Ice Age ended, but the human story it began continues. Every time we cooperate instead of competing, every time we share instead of hoarding, every time we innovate instead of surrendering, we honor the memory of those who conquered the ice. They didn't just survive the harshest conditions our planet could offer. The ice sheets are retreating. The great melt has begun, but with it comes humanity's greatest challenge, yet adaptation. For 40,000 years, our ancestors had perfected survival in a frozen world. Now that world was disappearing forever, and everything they knew was melting away with it. This is the story of how the end of the Ice Age didn't just change the climate, it changed us forever, transforming hunters into farmers, wanderers into settlers, and egalitarian bands into hierarchical civilizations. The price of this transformation was higher than anyone could have imagined. Picture the confusion of that first generation caught between worlds. Your grandfather's stories of endless tundra and reliable reindeer migrations suddenly became mythology. The landscape your people had called home for centuries was transforming beyond recognition. Where once stretched predictable hunting grounds, now forests grew blocking ancient paths. The megafauna your ancestors had followed for generations were disappearing one by one until only their bones remained frozen in the warming earth. The archaeological evidence paints a stark picture of this transition. At sites across Europe, we see the material culture of Ice Age, peoples literally stratified with the debris of the warming world. Stone tools designed for processing reindeer hide give way to implements meant for forest game. The specialized toolkit of the mammoth hunters becomes obsolete almost overnight, replaced by cruder, more generalized implements that speak of desperate improvisation. Dr. Brian Hayden's research into this transition reveals something profound about human nature when faced with existential change. The warming didn't just alter hunting patterns, it shattered the entire social fabric that had sustained humanity through the Ice Age. Band society, with its emphasis on sharing mobility and egalitarianism, began fragmenting under pressure from a warming world that supported larger, more sedentary populations. The demographic mathematics were brutal. Ice Age territories that had comfortably supported a single band of 30 people could now sustain 3 times that number. But the old solution of fission and movement no longer worked. For the first time in human history, there was nowhere else to go. Every suitable territory was occupied, every resource patch was claimed. The endless frontier that had always provided an escape valve for population pressure had closed forever. At Lepenski Vir on the Danube, we witness humanity's first tentative experiments with permanence. Houses with foundations appear in the archaeological record for the first time. Cemeteries show evidence of social hierarchy, with some burials containing elaborate grave goods, while others hold only basic implements. The egalitarian world of the Ice Age, where status came from skill and age, was stratifying into something recognizably modern with inherited wealth and permanent social classes. The nutritional evidence tells an equally dramatic story. Isotope analysis of human remains from this transitional period shows a sudden shift from the varied diet of Ice Age hunters to heavy reliance on just a few resources. At Starcar in England, the last hunter-gatherers were reduced to living primarily on fish as the great herds disappeared and forest replaced open grassland. These master survivalists who had thrived on mammoth and reindeer were now picking pike from streams and gathering shellfish from warming coastlines. But perhaps the most poignant evidence comes from Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, where 11,500 years ago, hunter-gatherers built massive stone circles carved with dying Ice Age animals. Dr. Klaus Schmidt, who excavated the site, called it the last stand of the hunter-gatherers. These weren't temples to gods, they were monuments to a dying way of life. The carvings show aurochs and lions and other creatures from the old world frozen in stone as their living counterparts vanished from the warming landscape. The transition to agriculture wasn't a choice, it was a demographic trap. As populations grew beyond what hunting and gathering could sustain, people faced a stark choice: intensify food production or starve. The archaeological record shows this wasn't a gradual adoption of farming, but a rapid, desperate shift driven by necessity. At Abu Huraira in Syria, we can trace this transformation in microscopic detail as wild grains in the archaeological layers give way to cultivated varieties, and varied plant remains are replaced by the monotonous residue of cereal processing. The genetic evidence reveals perhaps the most shocking aspect of this transition. In Europe, the indigenous hunter-gatherers didn't become farmers, they were replaced by them. When agricultural populations arrived from the Near East 8,000 years ago, carrying wheat, barley, and domesticated animals, the DNA of European hunter-gatherers largely vanished within centuries. The children of the Ice Age were overwhelmed by the children of grain, their ancient bloodlines absorbed into expanding farming populations. Yet fragments of Ice Age wisdom persisted longer than we might expect. In Scandinavia, the pitted ware culture maintained hunting and gathering alongside farmers for over 1,000 years. They traded seal oil for grain amber for pottery, two worlds coexisting until farming's demographic advantage inevitably won. These last hunter-gatherers weren't primitive holdouts. They were specialists who had found a niche in the New World, but ultimately even they couldn't resist the tide of agricultural expansion. The health consequences of this transition were severe and lasting. Ice Age hunter-gatherers had stood tall and strong, their teeth free of cavities, their bones showing signs of robust health. Early farmers were shorter, more prone to disease, and showed evidence of malnutrition in their skeletal remains. Cavities which affected less than 5% of hunter-gatherer teeth plagued up to 85% of early agricultural populations. The varied diet of the Ice Age gave way to dependence on a few staple crops, leaving people vulnerable to famine and nutritional deficiencies. Violence also increased dramatically during this transition. The egalitarian bands of the Ice Age rarely showed evidence of warfare, but early agricultural societies developed weapons specifically designed for killing humans. Fortified settlements appear in the archaeological record, along with mass graves containing the victims of organized conflict. Competition for the best agricultural land led to the first wars, as communities fought to control territories that could no longer support expanding populations through hunting and gathering alone. The psychological transformation was equally profound. Ice Age humans had lived in small, intimate groups where everyone knew everyone else. Conflict resolution was face-to-face and immediate. The band was a 24-hour support system where no one faced challenges alone. Agricultural societies created anonymous communities where you could live next to someone for years without knowing their name. The constant social support that had sustained humanity through the Ice Age was replaced by isolation and hierarchy. Sleep patterns even changed during this transition. Ice Age peoples had slept in groups, waking naturally once during the night for conversation, intimacy, and stargazing. This wasn't insomnia, it was normal human sleep behavior. Agricultural societies, with their emphasis on individual family units and rigid work schedules, imposed straight-through sleep patterns that went against millions of years of human evolution. Modern sleep disorders may be the legacy of this ancient disruption to natural rhythms. The environmental consequences of the transition were also severe. Hunter-gatherer populations had lived sustainably for 40,000 years without degrading their environments. Early agricultural societies began the process of deforestation, soil depletion, and species extinction that continues today. The mammoth steppe ecosystem that had supported the greatest diversity of large mammals in Earth's history was replaced by simplified agricultural landscapes that could support far fewer species. Yet from this loss came unprecedented gains. Agriculture supported specialists who weren't directly involved in food production. This enabled the development of writing, mathematics, astronomy, and all the other innovations we associate with civilization. Cities arose, enabling the concentration of knowledge and the rapid spread of innovations. Art, music, and literature flourished beyond anything the Ice Age had achieved, as agricultural surpluses freed human creativity from the immediate demands of survival. The irony is profound. In trying to escape the harshness of Ice Age life, humans created new challenges their ancestors never faced. Obesity, diabetes, depression, and social isolation are diseases of abundance and comfort unknown to hunter-gatherer societies. Our Stone Age bodies evolved for a world of scarcity and constant movement, but now inhabit a world of plenty and sedentary lifestyles, leading to what anthropologists call evolutionary mismatch. Today, as we face our own climate crisis, the end of the Ice Age offers both warning and hope. The transformation 13,000 years ago shows that humans are capable of radical adaptation when circumstances demand it. But it also demonstrates that such adaptations come with costs that may not be apparent for generations. Our ancestors survived the transition from Ice Age to agriculture, but became something fundamentally different in the process. The ultimate lesson may be that adaptation isn't optional. The Ice Age hunters couldn't choose to maintain their way of life any more than we can choose to return to theirs. Forward is the only direction available, but perhaps we can learn from both worlds, combining Ice Age wisdom about cooperation, sustainability, and community with agricultural innovations in technology organization and knowledge preservation. As climate change once again transforms our world, we face challenges remarkably similar to those our ancestors confronted 13,000 years ago. Resource scarcity, population pressure, environmental degradation, and social upheaval all echo the crises that ended the Ice Age. The question isn't whether we'll adapt, but what will become in the process. The ice melted, and with it an entire world, but from that meltwater grew everything we recognize as human civilization. The ice cracked beneath their feet like thunder. The mammoth charged, 9 tons of fury thundering across the frozen wasteland. But these weren't the desperate, starving cavemen of Hollywood imagination. These were master engineers of survival, and they were about to demonstrate the most sophisticated hunting technique the world had ever seen. Welcome to the final chapter of humanity's greatest survival story. We've journeyed through 40,000 years of ice, from the first needle that conquered the Arctic to the last mammoth that fell to human ingenuity. We've seen how our ancestors didn't just survive the harshest conditions Earth could unleash. They thrived, creating art, music, and complex societies that would make modern humans weep with envy. But every story has an ending, and the end of the Ice Age wasn't just climate change, it was the transformation of everything that made us human. The signs were everywhere by 15,000 years ago. At Starcar in England, the last hunter-gatherers built wooden platforms over newly formed wetlands, desperately trying to maintain their ancient way of life. Their tools, once perfectly adapted to tundra hunting, now seemed clumsy in the emerging forests. The reindeer herds their ancestors had followed for millennia were gone, replaced by solitary deer that hid among the trees. Dr. Conrad Huon's ice core data reveals the shocking truth about this transition. Temperatures didn't rise gradually over centuries. They spiked 10 degrees Celsius in some regions in just 50 years. Imagine New York developing Miami's climate before a child becomes a grandparent. For humans who had spent 40,000 years perfecting Ice Age survival, this sudden warmth was catastrophic. The old hunter at Starcar wasn't facing a gentle spring. He was watching his entire world dissolve. The skills that had saved his people through the harshest period in human history, the knowledge that had been passed down through 1,000 generations, suddenly became obsolete. Where once stretched endless tundra perfect for tracking herds, dense forests now blocked his view. The reliable world of ice was melting, and with it, everything his people had known. But humans don't surrender easily. At sites across Europe, we see desperate innovation. Specialized tools for forest hunting appear in the archaeological record. Wooden platforms and fish traps suggest a shift toward aquatic resources. At some sites, we find deer skull headdresses, possibly shamanic attempts to understand and control their changing world. The dietary evidence tells a story of declining nutrition. Isotope analysis by Dr. Nikki Milner reveals a sudden shift from the varied, rich diets of Ice Age hunters to heavy reliance on fish. These master survivalists, who had once commanded the full spectrum of Ice Age resources, were reduced to living primarily on pike and perch. The great herds were gone. The diverse plant foods were changing. The buffet of the Ice Age had closed. More profound than the environmental changes were the social upheavals. The banned society that had sustained humanity for 40,000 years began breaking down. At Lepenski Vir, on the Danube, we see something unprecedented in human history. Permanent settlements with foundations, cemeteries with hierarchical burials, and evidence of wealth inequality. The egalitarian world of the Ice Age was stratifying. Dr. Brian Hayden calls it the end of the original affluent society. Hunter-gatherers had worked perhaps 20 hours a week, sharing everything with no chiefs or permanent leaders. Early farmers worked 40 to 60 hours a week. Health declined, violence increased, but population exploded. Why did they make this trade? Why exchange health and freedom for backbreaking agricultural labor? The answer lies in what researchers call the demographic trap. As climate warmed, populations grew rapidly. Territories that once supported a single band now held 3 or 4. The old solution, fission and movement to new territories, no longer worked. For the first time in human history, there was nowhere else to go. Every territory was occupied. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, we see humanity's response to this crisis. Massive stone circles carved with dying Ice Age animals, built by hunter-gatherers 11,500 years ago. Dr. Klaus Schmidt, who excavated the site, called it the last stand of the hunter-gatherers. These weren't temples to gods. They were monuments to a dying way of life. The lions, bears, and wild boars carved into the stones were disappearing from the landscape, and the people who had lived alongside them for millennia knew their time was ending too. The transition wasn't voluntary. Genetic evidence shows that most European hunter-gatherers didn't become farmers. They were replaced by them. When agricultural populations arrived from the Near East 8,000 years ago, hunter-gatherer DNA largely vanished within centuries. The children of the ice were overwhelmed by the children of grain, not through conquest, but through demographics. Farmers simply had more children, and numbers won, but fragments of Ice Age wisdom persisted. In Scandinavia, the pitted ware culture maintained hunting and gathering alongside farmers for 1,000 years. They traded seal oil for grain, amber for pottery. Two worlds coexisted until farming's demographic advantage inevitably won. These last holdouts remind us that the choice between hunting and farming wasn't always clear-cut. Some communities have found ways to bridge both worlds, maintaining ancient skills while adopting new technologies. The psychological impact of this transformation was profound. Art changed from naturalistic animals to abstract symbols. Music shifted from portable instruments that could be carried by nomadic bands to fixed installations and permanent settlements. Stories went from memorized epics passed down orally to written texts that required specialists to read. The direct, intimate world of the band became the abstract, hierarchical world of civilization. Yet something extraordinary was gained in this loss. Writing preserved knowledge across generations instead of letting it die with individuals. Agriculture supported specialists who could dedicate their lives to innovation. Cities enabled the concentration of minds that would eventually produce philosophy, mathematics, and science. The warmth that ended the Ice Age way of life also enabled everything we call civilization. The health costs were immediate and measurable. Dr. Amanda Henry's comparison of ancient teeth tells the story starkly. 40,000-year-old hunter-gatherer teeth were worn but cavity-free, telling tales of a diet that would make modern nutritionists weep with envy. 10,000-year-old agricultural teeth were riddled with cavities, showing signs of malnutrition. Hunter-gatherers stood taller, men averaging 5 feet 10 inches, women 5 feet 5 inches. After agriculture, men dropped to 5 feet 7 inches, women to 5 feet 2 inches. It took humanity 10,000 years to regain our Ice Age height. The metabolic changes were equally dramatic. Dr. Herman Pontzer's research reveals that despite their active lifestyle, hunter-gatherers burned roughly the same calories as sedentary office workers today. Their bodies had achieved perfect efficiency, extracting maximum energy from minimum input. The Ice Age body was calibrated for scarcity. Now we've surrounded it with abundance. It's like putting rocket fuel in a Prius. Our sleep patterns transformed too. Dr. Jerome Siegel studied hunter-gatherer sleep and found they slept less than we do, about 6.5 hours, but with crucial differences. They woke once during the night, every night, for about an hour. This wasn't insomnia, it was normal. A time for conversation, intimacy, and stargazing. Modern straight-through sleep is an industrial invention. The social changes cut deepest. In a 30-person band, you knew everyone intimately. Conflict resolution was immediate and face-to-face. Compare that to our anonymous cities, where you can live next to someone for years without knowing their name. Dr. Robin Dunbar's research shows our brains are still wired for 150 meaningful relationships, about the size of several related Ice Age bands. We gained civilization, but lost community. We gained variety, but lost nutrition. We gained comfort, but lost resilience. Yet humanity's capacity for adaptation shines through even this loss. The same creativity that enabled Ice Age survival found new outlets in agricultural societies. The cooperation that sustained hunting bands evolved into the complex institutions of civilization. The storytelling that preserved survival knowledge became literature and philosophy. The art that decorated cave walls became the paintings and sculptures that fill our museums. Most remarkably, we're rediscovering Ice Age wisdom in our modern world. Paleo diets attempt to replicate hunter-gatherer nutrition. Intermittent fasting mimics the feast and famine cycles our ancestors knew. Barefoot running recreates the natural movement patterns we evolved for. Co-sleeping with children echoes the close physical contact of band society. Community gardens recreate the gathering experience. CrossFit mimics hunting's varied movements. Forest bathing satisfies our deep need for nature. The ultimate irony is that in trying to escape the harshness of Ice Age life, we've created new challenges our ancestors never faced. Obesity, diabetes, depression, and isolation are diseases of abundance and comfort. As we face climate change, resource depletion, and social fragmentation, perhaps the Ice Age's greatest gift isn't what we gained or lost, but what we learned about human adaptability. The Clovis culture of North America provides a perfect example of this adaptability. When the Younger Dryas struck 12,900 years ago, bringing temperatures crashing down 15 degrees Celsius in just 3 years, the Clovis people vanished from the archaeological record within centuries. Their beautiful spear points, their sophisticated hunting techniques, their entire way of life disappeared as if they had never existed. But other cultures emerged from this catastrophe, more diverse and innovative than before. This pattern repeats throughout human history. Crisis forces adaptation. Catastrophe creates opportunity. The ice came in a day, but humans adapted in a generation. When the mammoth steppe collapsed, we invented agriculture. When the megafauna went extinct, we domesticated animals. When the stable climate of the Holocene arrived, we built civilizations. Today, as we face our own climate crisis, the lesson from our Ice Age ancestors is clear. Adaptation isn't optional. Change isn't gradual. The Ice Age hunters' descendants didn't choose agriculture. It chose them. They could no more return to hunting and gathering than we can return to pre-industrial life. Forward is the only direction, but perhaps we can learn from both worlds. The Ice Age taught us cooperation, resilience, and sustainability. The Warm Age taught us innovation, accumulation, and growth. Our challenge is synthesis, combining Ice Age wisdom with modern capability. The ice melted, and with it a world. But from that meltwater grew everything we are. The question now, as our world transforms again, is what will grow from the changes we face. Will we repeat the mistakes of the past, or will we remember the lessons our ancestors learned in Earth's frozen crucible? The old hunter at Starcar eventually put down his spear and picked up a farming tool. His grandchildren learned to plant seeds instead of track herds. His great-grandchildren built permanent houses instead of following the seasons. Each generation adapted, survived, and passed on their genes and their stories to us. We are all children of the ice. Every breath we take, every thought we think, every innovation we create carries the DNA and the wisdom of those who survived when survival seemed impossible. They conquered the mammoth, mastered the needle, painted by firelight, and sang songs that echoed across frozen valleys. They loved, they laughed, they mourned, and they endured. The Ice Age ended, but its greatest creation survived, us. And in our adaptation to whatever comes next, the spirit of those ancient survivors lives on. The ice shaped us, but we shaped ourselves. The cold tested us, but we tested our limits. The darkness surrounded us, but we created light. From the first human who looked at a piece of bone and saw a needle, to the last mammoth hunter who watched the herds disappear, to the first farmer who planted a seed in hope, to us, facing our own uncertain future, the story continues. We are the inheritors of 40,000 years of human ingenuity, and whatever challenges lie ahead, we carry within us the wisdom of the ice. The cavemen didn't just survive the Ice Age, they conquered it, and in conquering it, they became us. The greatest survival story ever told isn't about the past. It's about the future we're still writing, one adaptation at a time.